Have you ever noticed that some of the strongest, most grounded people you'll ever meet are the ones who choose to walk alone? Not because they've been abandoned, not because they're antisocial or broken, but because somewhere along the way, they discovered a truth that most people spend their whole lives avoiding, that peace is more valuable than company, that silence can be a sanctuary, and that solitude, when embraced, becomes a superpower. There is a quiet strength in choosing yourself, a rare kind of courage in deciding to stand alone, not out of fear, but out of deep, unshakable self-respect. While the world runs in circles trying to feel whole, chasing relationships, distractions, noise, applause, some people realize they're already whole. They stop looking outward for completion and turn inward for connection. They look in the mirror, not with longing, but with certainty, and they say, "I complete me." Living alone, mentally, emotionally, even physically, isn't a sentence, it's a liberation. It means you no longer fear your own thoughts. You no longer run from your past. And you no longer fill your life with shallow conversations and empty connections just to avoid being alone with yourself. Because you've come to understand something vital. Solitude doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Some relationships deplete your energy more than being alone ever could. In fact, when you choose solitude, you eliminate the constant draining pull of trying to maintain relationships that don't align with your soul. You reclaim your time, you protect your space, you move through life without having to constantly ask for permission or explain your vision to someone who doesn't understand your fire. You wake up each morning without tension in your chest. You don't brace yourself for another day of being misunderstood, overlooked, or underestimated. Instead, you rise with peace. You move with clarity. You live with intention. And that's where your power begins. Because when you live alone, you get to decide how your life unfolds. No more debates about where the dishes go or compromising your passions to keep the peace. No more silencing your voice just to avoid confrontation. You get to design your space for you. You get to build routines that nourish your growth, not slow it down. If you want to start working at 5 in the morning or go for a walk under the stars at midnight, no explanations are needed. You're free to move in alignment with your own rhythm. That kind of autonomy does something to you. It trains your mind. It builds discipline. It creates a sense of order and strength that most people never experience because they're too busy adjusting themselves to fit into someone else's chaos. In solitude, you stop reacting and start creating. You stop managing other people's moods and start listening to your own needs. You learn to respond to your life with wisdom instead of impulse. And perhaps the most beautiful part of it all, you begin to hear your own voice again. In relationships that aren't aligned, your voice gets quieter over time. Your truth becomes something you whisper instead of something you stand on. You compromise again and again until you barely recognize who you've become. But when you're alone, truly alone, you start to listen. Not to the noise of the world, but to the wisdom inside you. You reconnect with your inner compass. You sharpen your intuition. You begin making decisions not based on fear or guilt, but based on truth. People confuse being alone with being lost. But the truth is, some of the most found, most spiritually grounded, most emotionally rich people are the ones who've walked the longest roads by themselves. They've cried alone, healed alone, rebuilt alone, and risen stronger than ever before. They've built a life that's rooted in authenticity, a life where their soul can breathe. Not just survive, but truly breathe, deeply, freely, unapologetically. Living alone teaches you to pour into yourself. It teaches you that you don't have to be everything for someone else in order to be worthy. You don't need to fix, save, or shrink yourself to be loved. You are already worthy, just as you are. And when you stop trying to carry other people's weight, you finally have the strength to carry your own purpose. Because real freedom doesn't come from escape. It comes from ownership. From standing in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. From owning your space, your thoughts, your direction, your peace. When you live alone, you stop waiting for someone to choose you. You realize you've already been chosen by you, and that's more than enough. There is no applause, no standing ovation, no one clapping in the background, and that's okay. You're not here for the show, you're here for the shift, the internal transformation that happens when you finally stop chasing approval and start choosing alignment. When you walk alone, you become dangerous to anything that tried to distract, diminish, or define you, because you no longer need the noise to feel alive. You've tapped into something deeper, something timeless, something untouchable. So if you've ever felt like walking away from the noise, if you've ever felt more yourself in solitude than you did in a crowd, trust that instinct. If you've ever felt stronger on your own than around people who couldn't see your worth, that's not a weakness. That's your soul calling you home. That's the voice of transformation whispering, you don't have to settle. This is your moment to rise, to return to your power, to stop shrinking and start becoming. Not someone else's version of success, but your own highest vision of who you were born to be. And it all starts in the quiet, in the solitude, in the decision to no longer betray yourself just to feel accepted. Because the truth is, peace is the most powerful thing you can protect. And once you find it, you never trade it for friction again. You never beg for belonging. You never compromise your truth to keep people who were never meant to walk your path. You simply walk forward, alone, perhaps, but stronger than ever. This is what limitless motivation looks like. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not desperate. It's rooted, it's still, it's unwavering. And it begins the moment you realize that walking alone is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of becoming unstoppable. When you live alone, silence stops feeling awkward. It becomes sacred. What once may have felt empty or uncomfortable transforms into something profound. In that silence, you begin to hear everything you've been drowning out for years, the noise of other people's opinions, the distractions that numbed you, the surface-level relationships that drained you, the smiles you forced just to get through the day. All of it fades. And what remains is stillness. Finally, the room is still, and for the first time in a long time, your thoughts are no longer competing for space. They're not suffocating under pressure. They're breathing, expanding, rising to the surface with clarity and strength. That's when it hits you. How much energy you've spent trying to be understood, trying to explain yourself to people who never really wanted to know you, trying to be seen by people who only looked at what you could offer them. That kind of emotional labor doesn't just tire you, it empties you. Piece by piece, you give yourself away until there's nothing left but the shell of someone who once had dreams, passion, fire. But when you're alone, everything changes. The confusion begins to dissolve. The fog starts to lift. And for the first time, clarity walks in. Not as a whisper, not as a fleeting thought, but as a presence, steady and undeniable. You stop guessing who you are. You stop outsourcing your identity to the people around you. You stop performing. No more pretending you're okay just to keep the peace. No more walking on eggshells, smiling through tension, absorbing energy that was never yours to carry. There's no one there to misread your silence, no one projecting their pain onto your presence. It's just you and truth. And there's a beauty in that, an honesty that most people never experience. Because living alone removes the static. It strips life down to its core. You no longer need to sort through the mess to find what matters. You're already standing in it, and what you discover is something most people live their whole lives avoiding. Peace isn't found in comfort. It's not in the distractions, not in the convenience of being surrounded. It's not in noise. Peace is found in clarity, and clarity only comes when the world gets quiet. But let's be honest, when you're constantly surrounded by people, especially the wrong ones, their voices start to cloud your mind. You begin to second-guess yourself. You hesitate even on things you once knew deep in your gut. and slowly you forget what your own voice sounds like. But when you're alone, you recalibrate. You begin to hear that inner voice again. And this time it doesn't whisper, it commands. It speaks with authority. It tells you what needs to be done. It points you toward your next level. It reminds you of your worth. And without the weight of someone else's expectations, without the emotional noise clouding your thoughts, you actually start to move with purpose, with precision, with power. You're no longer seeking approval. You're no longer waiting for permission. You're no longer dimming your flame so others can feel comfortable in their shadows. See, people go looking for clarity in relationships, in feedback, in validation. They chase it through social approval, romantic attachments, groupthink, but they never find it. Because clarity doesn't live there. Clarity lives in solitude. In those quiet mornings when the sun hasn't yet risen and it's just you, your breath, and your thoughts.